You notice things before they finish happening. It's a subtle calibration, a flicker at the very edge of your vision, a shift in tone of a room that was perfectly fine a moment ago. A pause in conversation that lingers half a second too long, carrying a weight that wasn't there before. You see the smile that doesn't quite reach when it usually does. The way the muscles around the eyes remain static, while the mouth performs its duty. It doesn't feel like effort, it doesn't feel like you're working or studying the people around you. It feels automatic, like breathing or the way your heart finds its rhythm. It is as if your attention is always standing a few steps ahead of the present moment, standing watch. Even now, in a space that is objectively safe, some part of you is still listening for what might be. You're scanning for the atmospheric pressure to drop, waiting for the first scent of rain to on with the wind. Without realizing it, this way of being began very early. Before you had word for psychology or the intricacies of the nervous system, your body was already learning how to read a room. It didn't happen out of curiosity. It didn't happen because you were particularly nosy child. It happened out of necessity. You learned that moods could change with the suddenness of a shuttering closing. You learned that emotions didn't always announce themselves without shouts or tears. Sometimes they lived in the way a door was shut or the specific heavy silence that followed a question. You learned that your safety, your emotional stability, your sense of belonging depended on noticing the subtle signs before they became obvious. If you could see the storm while it was still smudge on the horizon, you had time to prepare. You had time to become what was needed. This is how a child disappears. They do not become invisible by fading away into the shadows. They disappear by becoming exquisitely painfully aware of everything outside of themselves, by turning the lens of their attention outward so consistently and with such intensity that their own inward signals grow quieter and quieter. You learned to observe because observation gave you time to adjust your posture, time to soften your voice, time to stay out of the way of something unnamed but deeply felt. You didn't decide to become observant, your system did it for you. It was a brilliant, silent move on the chessboard of your childhood. It wasn't because you were weak, but because you were human. And humans learn fastest where the stakes are highest. Your nervous system adapted to uncertainty by sharpening your perception until it was razor. It learned to scan faces, to map the micro expressions of the adults around you, to track the emotional undercurrents of the house like a sonar. You learned that anticipation was safer than reaction. Reaction is what happens when you are caught off guard, and being caught off guard felt like precipice you couldn't afford to fall from. Awareness could prevent disruption. If you know the anger was coming, it couldn't shatter you. If you know the sadness was descending, you could build a bridge to meet it. Over time, this became your baseline state. It is the frequency your soul is tuned to. You weren't just watching people, you were regulating the space between them. You were the one holding the invisible threads, trying to keep the tension from snapping. Sometimes this happens when a child senses that the emotions in their environment are unpredictable or overwhelming. The environment doesn't have to be dangerous or in a loud or obvious way. It can simply be inconsistent. It can be a place where things are left unspoken, where the truth of the room contradicts what is being said. A child in that space learns that being deeply observant is the only way to keep things stable. Noticing early allows you to prepare for what might come next, to manage the weather before the first drop of rain falls. So you watched quietly, constantly. You became skilled at understanding others without ever weighing thoughts. How? You sensed when a person needed space before they even felt crowded. You sensed when they needed a reassurance before they realized they were anxious. You sensed the exact moment someone was about to withdraw, and you learned how to lean in or pull back with a precision that felt like magic to those around you. Without realizing it, you become the person who manages the emotional climate. This kind of observation often gets praised as you grow older. People call you insightful, they call you empathic or unusually grounded. They say you have a high emotional intelligence, but you just get it. And you do, you really do. You see the world in high definition while others are seeing it in blurred shapes. But the cost of getting it so early is rarely visible. What saved you then now imprisons you, because observations doesn't have an off switch. It doesn't stop just because you moved out of that house, or just because your current environment is stable, but nervous system holds onto what once worked with a desperate white-knuckled grip, even when there is no longer a need to scan for threats. Your attention stays wide, it stays alert, it stays ready for the floor to fall out. As an adult, you may find it difficulty to fully, truly relax around others, even with the people you love. Even in relationships that are healthy and calm, part of you is still reading between the lines. It isn't mistrust in the traditional sense, it's a deeply ingrained habit of the body. You are attuned to micro changes that most people don't even have the sensors to detect. A delayed response to a text message, slight shift in the energy of greeting, a subtle withdrawal behind the eyes. Your mind registers these things instantly. Your body responds before you can even form a conscious thought. You feel a tightening in the chest, a pulling back of your own energy, a quiet internal recalibration. You are already preparing for the shift, already building the defense, already figuring out how to fix a problem that might not even exist. This isn't anxiety in the way people usually describe it. It isn't loud or frantic. It is more refined, more contained. It lives in the background as form of high-functioning vigilance, disguised as insight. It is the exhaustion of being a lighthouse that can never stop spinning its light across the dark water, looking for ships that may never come. You may feel a silent responsibility for maintaining the emotional balance of every room you enter. If someone seems off, you feel it in your own skin. If tension rises, you are the one who subtly de-escalates. If a silence becomes heavy, you are the one who interprets its meaning. Without realizing it, you may have taken on the role of the emotional interpreter, trying to understand what is happening beneath the surface so that nothing falls apart. This is a form of parentification. Even if you were literally taking care of a parent's physical needs, it is internal. You learned to hold an awareness that wasn't age appropriate. You learned to carry the weight of complexity before you had the support to process it, so you processed it alone. Observation became your way of staying connected to the world without being overwhelmed by it. But there is a darker side to this gift. When you all are always observing, you are rarely resting. When your attention is always focused outward, your own inner signals can become muted, like a radio station drifting out of range. You may know exactly how everyone else in the room is feeling, but when someone asks you how you are, you might find yourself struggling to find the words. You might find that you don't actually know. Your own emotions might arrive late to the scene. They might show up hours after an event, or days later appearing as a sudden crushing fatigue. They might show up as numbness or a vague sense of disconnection that is hard to trace to any one cause. This is the result of a system that has been on duty for so long that it has forgotten how to listen to itself. Deep observation can also create a subtle, invisible distance. When you are watching, you are by definition slightly outside the moment. You are a witness rather than a participant. You are safe, but you are not fully touched. You are present, but you are not fully immersed. It is the difference between watching a fire from behind a glass window and feeling the heat of it on your skin. Closeness can feel complicated here. You want it, yet being deeply seen by another person requires you to lower your guard, to stop the scan, and that can feel profoundly disorienting. It can feel like putting down your shield in the middle of a battlefield. You may notice yourself staying just a step back, even with people you trust. You listen more than you reveal. You understand more than you seek to be understood. This leads to a quite specific kind of loneliness. It isn't the loneliness of being alone. It is the loneliness of being known for your insight rather than your vulnerability. People come to you for your calm, for your reflection, for your ability to get them, and you offer it naturally. But you may find yourself wondering who is watching you with that same level of care. You may wonder who notices the micro shift in your voice when you're tired of being the one who sees. What saved you then now imprisons you. Not because the observation is wrong, but because it became your only position. It became the only way you knew how to be in the world. Still, it is important to hold this truck gently. Nothing about this is a flaw. Your observant nature is not evidence of damage. It is not a sign that you are broken or too sensitive. It is evidence of an incredible intelligent adaptation. It is the mark of a system that learned to survive complexity with precision rather than force. You didn't harden your heart to survive. You didn't become cold. You sharpened, and sharpening comes with edges. There may be a moments now when you sense how tired this constant awareness has made you, a quiet exhaustion that doesn't leave to sleep but feels like it's woven into the very fabric of your being, a sense that your mind is always working, even in the stillness of the night. This is the cost of vigilance carried for too long. Your nervous system learned that watching was safer than relaxing. It learned that awareness prevented harm. It hasn't yet learned that it is allowed to rest without something going wrong. Understanding this doesn't immediately change the way the neurons fire. It doesn't instantly stop the scan, but it can soften the way you hold yourself. It allows space for a quiet compassion toward the part of you that learned to see everything, the part that noticed what others missed, the part that kept things from escalating simply by paying attention. This part of you isn't trying to be difficult, it is trying to be anxious, it is trying to protect you. It is the guardian that never left its post because it was never told that the war was over. And maybe, as you sit with this awareness, something subtle shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a small easing of the tension in your shoulders, a recognition that you don't have to be on duty every single moment to remain safe. The deeply observant child didn't disappear because something was wrong with them. They disappeared into perception because it was the most intelligent option available at the time. They traded their own presence for the safety of the group. Seeing that clearly, recognition, the brilliance, and the burden of your own sight can feel like a quiet release. It isn't an instruction to change, it isn't a demand to relax. It is just a gentle understanding that the watchful part of you has earned its rest, even if it doesn't quite know how to take it yet. And sometimes, simply being seen that truth is enough to let the room inside you grow a little quieter. For a moment, then the scan stops. For a moment, there is nothing to fix. There is just you here, in the stillness. And for now, that is enough.